This is a Film Stories original podcast.
Hi, I'm Karen Conable. I played Judy and Chucky in Plus One and Mrs. Peacock in Home. And you're listening to the X-Cast.
Welcome back, everyone, to the X-Cast. The truth is in here. I'm Tony Black, your host, and today I'm joined for a very special interview with one of the co-writers of the brand new episode. Now, I was challenging myself. Can I remember the title to actually say it? But I'm not even going to give it. I'm not going to try. I'm just going to go with the translation, which is followers. I'm not even going to do the numbers. Yeah, the one of the co-writers of Followers, Kristen Cloke-Morgan. It's great to have you on the show, Kristen. Thank you so much for coming on the X-Cast.
Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's really great to speak to you, and you know, you are, as I just said to you off air, you're one of these people I feel like I've been watching ever since I was a teenager. You know, in episodes of the X-Files and things like Space Above and Beyond and Millennium. So it's really nice to speak to you. And obviously, with this new X-Files episode, which has gone down really well, I think, amongst fans, you're back in the X-Files limelight with this. So it must be really nice. How do you feel the reaction has gone so far? And it's only been a couple of days, but how do you feel the reaction's gone for the new episode?
You know, I think I feel like most people have really liked it, which has been really, really so nice. I mean, everybody seems to have had a positive reaction to it, and I think, you know, when we wrote this, you know, Darren, who's, you know, also my brother-in-law, was like, this is going to, you know, be really, you know, something different or interesting, or it's going to be a total failure. And Glenn and I were like, thanks, Darren. So, you know, I'm happy to hear that it wasn't a total failure, because it's an ambitious thing. It's one of those, you know, Glenn and I always say, when you get up to the bell, ring it, you know. So I think we tried to ring the bell, and I'm glad that people don't feel like we failed to do that. So that's good.
It really is an ambitious kind of idea. And yeah, I think the reaction from what I've seen, certainly amongst a lot of people, is that I wouldn't say surprised them that it worked so well, because I think in the creative hands that it had, I think everyone was pretty confident it was going to be really good. But I think quite how well it all came together, I think, and how exactly that worked, as really pleased people, and you know, the ambition of it, and that it feels like something really different. And that's certainly how I felt. I feel like it's something really unusual for the X-Files, while still being very much in that sort of vein. So how did this all come to be? I mean, it's a really different episode. So what was the specific inspiration behind doing this?
Well, Glenn, he handed this episode over to Shannon and I. He was meant to write two of them, write and direct two. And I think he wanted to, you know, give two women a shot on the show. And Glenn and I are writing partners anyway. We have projects together, and we wrote together on a show called The Intruders, where Glenn and I wrote most of them together. And we have some pilots and a movie that we, you know, are still, you know, trying to get out there, and other projects going in the future. So we work together. I mean, we've worked together as partners for over 20 years now in all different kinds of ways. So it was exciting, the possibility of doing this together in this way, where he was directing something I wrote. He's directed me. He's been the producer on things that I've acted in. He's written for me, but I've never written for him to direct. So that was exciting. It was a new challenge for our partnership, which was great. And then Shannon was the writer's assistant. So she had been in the writer's room at the beginning of when all the writers were getting together and talking about their episodes. So she sort of had that kind of insight. And being that it was a freelance position, she brought that aspect to the table. So we partnered up to do this, and we had never written before. So, we had to kind of figure all that part out. And then Glenn had like 5 things that he wanted to do. And the drone thing, I was in the kitchen one day. I mean, I think this was like 3 years ago or something. And he's like, and I think it was maybe even before the X-Files came back the last time, or maybe just after. And he's like, the next time I do an X-Files, I really want to do something with drones. And I was like, okay. And I went back to doing whatever I was doing, never thinking it was going to be me who was going to have to figure out how to execute it. So, and he had like a couple things that he was like, well, it should be drones, no dialogue. I like a fireball. And so I'm going off to direct my episode. You two go at it. And so we're like, oh, great. So it was kind of like that. It was a big puzzle. But I think those were some visual, those were just a few of the visual ideas that he was inspired by and areas that he wanted to explore. And, and we talked about the technology, and he brought up the idea of, the teaser about the chat bot. And so we did the research into that, and, and that was a good launching pad into the other, there's a good allegory for the episode. And so it kind of developed from there. And then, Shannon and I sat in my garage and worked the rest of it out.
I had heard of that Twitter bot thing before, actually.
Yeah.
So when it came on, I was like, oh yeah, this is a really interesting way in, actually. This idea of an artificial intelligence that's learning, that is constantly trying to evolve and learn. And I think it's I review the episodes, and one of the things I wrote in my review, which was about how it feels different from some of the previous AI episodes in the X-Files, because it's the AI, to me, the AI isn't menacing at all. The AI is just trying to figure out what's going on and learn from humans. And it's like at the end, Mulder says, we need to be better teachers, because what we're teaching AI isn't necessarily reflecting in the right ways. And that's what I picked up from it. I don't know if that was the intent, really, in terms of the theme and the idea behind the allegory.
Yeah, it absolutely is the theme. And I think, especially right now where, I used to like Facebook because, my mom was on it. My sister who lives in the UK is on it, and my nephew and who's in the UK, and so it's nice to be able to have family and friends. But then, during the election, you could just see people that you care about in these incredible fights because they were sending out all this disinformation about politics and so forth and so on. And it's really divisive. And that whole thing with the chat bot is so upsetting because it was so important for this small sect in the internet community who's really has such a loud and angry voice to create so much dissension. And I think that we're in this time now where we have to be hyper aware that there are people and thusly bots representing those people whose main focus is to divide and is to separate us, make us angry, make us question, make us fearful. And we have to combat that with goodness, kindness, and the attempt to be better teachers, not just to AI, but to each other, and to really continue to be focused on our goal of, peace, democracy, and human rights, and all of those things. So I think it's appropriate of our times on a micro and a macro level.
It feels in tune as well with a lot of the ideas that are rippling through the entire season, really, of the X-Files this year, and it felt like a companion piece almost to this, in some respects. I mean, for me, obviously, it's directed by Glenn as well, so it's the same, visual kind of style. But it felt like a companion piece in that it's tapping into those same sort of anxieties and fears about the abuse of technology and about how, we need to be more careful with this and what we do. I mean, obviously in this, it was Langley uploading his digital consciousness to the cloud and not realising what he was getting into. Whereas in this one, like you said, it's all about being aware about how we're interacting online. So was that a conscious sort of decision between the two of you to make followers of a similar kind of companion in a way?
I don't think it was intentional, but I think those are the kinds of things that, for us, especially in America, these are the kinds of things that we're thinking about. When you have bots that are playing such a big role, and technology playing such a big role in our politics right now. Our president tweets, it's like,
yeah.
Okay. So, I think if it's not on your mind, you're not awake. So I think it's just part of the dialogue. It's part of what everybody's thinking about now. How are we going to manage the next step of, human AI, humans and AI being together? How are we going to handle technology in a way that's responsible, so that it's working with us and not against us? If you read, we read all those Elon Musk articles, and he takes it all the way to the next level.
It is a very sort of Black Mirror idea, isn't it? And I know I've read that Glenn said he was inspired by Charlie Brooker's Black Mirror, which obviously he's done well in the United States, even though it's originated in the UK. Is that something? Are you a fan of that show? Do you feel that not just that, but a lot of sort of anthology sort of storytelling is coming into something like Followers? Because I got a feeling that it could have been sort of plucked out and put into a Twilight Zone episode in a way if you took Mulder and Scully out of the story.
Yeah, people are comparing it to Black Mirror. I purposely did not watch any of this season of Black Mirror during the writing of it, because I kept hearing, because when we had the idea, someone said, oh, there's something similar. So Shannon had seen it, so we made sure that we steered very clear of whatever that was. And I purposely didn't want to watch it because I didn't want to feel like I was influenced. I think that show's brilliant. I love Mr. Robot too. I mean that's much more serialized, but I think all those shows are brilliant, just brilliant shows. I mean, and so ambitious and thoughtful. So I purposely didn't not watch them because I didn't want to be inspired by their brilliance, and I also didn't want to be terribly shut down and intimidated, I guess, by Black Mirror, because I think it is such a great show. So now I'm excited. It's funny because my 13-year-old daughter watches them. I go into her room and she's like binge watching all of them. It's such a great show. So I'm excited to catch up with Black Mirror now. But yeah, I mean, I think all of those TV shows, I mean, people will say, and I guess this is just kind of goes back to what we're talking about. People say, that's a Black Mirror or whatever. Oh, they're taking from Black Mirror. And you can just say, all of these shows that are on, there's so much television on right now, and there's so much really excellent television that if you're in television, whether you're writing or acting or directing or production design or cinematography or whatever, if you're not inspired by some of the things that you're watching, then you're just not watching the right things. I mean, they're exciting and they're setting such a high bar. And if and it's exciting to try to even get into that artistic conversation. So,
well, I honestly would say that this episode does. I really do. I really do think it could be an episode of Black Mirror, and I mean that in a complimentary way, in the sense that
no, I really I appreciate it. I really do.
Yeah. It had that same. Every time you watch a Black Mirror, you come away either distressed or thinking about what has been said, and you really end up looking at your smartphone or whatever and thinking, oh my god, what, I need to get off this, that kind of thing. Whereas with this episode, I felt it was a cautionary tale, but a nice cautionary tale. Some of the Black Mirror stories are terrifying, whereas this one, it wasn't in the same way. It was really good, but it didn't go down that same road. But there were moments that I think the one that really reminded me of a recent Black Mirror, which you'll see when you watch the episode, was when they're in the factory at the end, and they're like robotic sort of dogs that are coming towards Mulder and Scully in the episode. There's a specific episode of Black Mirror that you'll recognise a similarity, but it's not a bad thing. It shows that I think if you're thinking on similar lines about what technology does and where it's going, and I think that's why it's gone down well, because it taps into something I think we're all thinking, and there's so many clever, stylish little innovations with followers, like the beginning, like the sushi restaurant, which is just
isn't that great? Isn't that brilliant? I mean, in writing that, it was just you have this visual thing in your mind that you're like it should feel a little bit like Space Odyssey, and so you're trying to what does that feel like? And you put it on paper, and then you get to Mark Freeborn, the production designer, and he creates it for you, and you're like, oh my God, I was in my bedroom with my computer, and here it is. It's just he's extraordinary. But I mean I keep saying this in all my interviews, and I really can't say it enough, that this episode, because of the nature of it, really, I think it was a challenge for the crew. And we were episode 7. And since you've seen all the other episodes, that crew does all the episodes. They had the same DP, so the same crew, the same camera crew, the same production crew, the same production design crew, builders, lighting, everything, do every single one of those episodes, and each episode is more ambitious than the next. And they showed up for us. I mean, our AD was sick, our second AD was sick. Mark had, hurt his ankle and had ankle surgery or something, and he had been in the hospital, and they still were able to come up. The DP this season, Craig Wobleski, is so talented and such a lovely person, and I just think the way he shot it was so beautiful. And so that crew, and the editing was there was a new editor on the show this season, Eleanor Infante, and she is a genius. And I think so. All of those people really brought their A game, and I think it shows in the episode. So Glenn obviously did a great job of directing, I feel, but he was supported by, a really incredibly fine crew.
That doesn't surprise me at all, because it feels like it comes together in so many different ways, really. And visually, especially, it just looks like it looks, like I said earlier, it reminds me in some respects of this, but at the same time, it looks like its own thing. It really does stand apart in a way. And I think the very fact it does different things, like to mention the sushi scene again, the choice to do a silent scene, and in many ways a silent comedy scene with Mulder and Scully, is, I think, especially at this stage, especially at the end of probably what we all consider to be the end of the X-Files, to do that like 3 episodes before probably the finale ever, is really brave. And I think, what was it something that you guys thought, right, let's do this, let's really try and go for a silent scene and make it work?
I think we wanted to do as little dialogue in the whole episode as possible. And, when we were in the editing process, Glenn also really fought to keep music out of it, with the exception of the song that's played, the Teach Your Children. So I think, it was a conscious choice to make it as silent as possible, because there is a piece of that. I mean, that is true when you're dealing with all technology. It's just you and that thing, there's no other people. And what are the challenges of that for you as a person? And what are the challenges for the crew? Don't fill the sushi restaurant with people. Don't, for David and Jillian, try to keep them in their improv to not talk or to even make noise. You know what I mean? And they made really interesting choices that challenged them in a different way, because they really, are challenged by a lot of exposition. A lot of time they have a lot of explaining to do a lot. And I think that they really rose to the challenge as well. I think it was something different. It was a kind of an island, episode probably. I mean, I don't know, because I wasn't there for for all the episodes, but it was something different. I think it challenged all of us in a different way, and I think that's what Glenn as a filmmaker always sets out to do. I mean, you may not love every single thing that Glenn does, but you can't say that he phones it in, or that he's not trying to push the envelope, or that he's not trying to change something or say something or make you look at something different, or people will never, a lot of people never see their heating grates the same way, because they don't want tombs to come through it or whatever. And I think, yeah. I think that Glenn has always done that. He is looking, he's a true punk. He's always looking to shake it up. And so if you and even some of the things that he does, people don't like it at first when it comes out, and then, Space Above and Beyond. Oh, it got canceled in its first season, and people who love that show still, after all these years, they love it, and because it that's Glenn trying to push it, and sometimes it's a little ahead of its time, I think.
Yeah, I've often thought that had it maybe come out 10, 15 years later, I think it would have got much more than one season, Space Above and Beyond. Definitely. It is one of those examples, like you said, of when Glenn and obviously James Wong are really trying to do different things. And I've gone on record before in some of my writing and some of the podcasts in that I genuinely have always felt that Morgan and Wong as a collaborative duo in the old days of the X-Files did some of the best episodes of that show. And I think it's one of the, and with Millennium as well. The second season of Millennium is one of my favourite TV seasons of all time.
Yeah, I liked it too. We still talk about it, and it's still so. I think season 2 of that show is still like you're still having things about all that and the Millennium Group and all that stuff that still come up. It's interesting.
No, it really is, and so it's like you said. These are ideas. These are challenging ideas. I think that have always been done over the years. So yeah, that's why Followers does feel so unique and so different, because it does do these challenging scenes, like the lack of dialogue. Like you said, it was an island. I think that's definitely true. I think it is like an island of an episode that sort of sits on its own in a way and does all these really interesting things. And there's a lot of people talking as well about Scully's house and how.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, I said I think totally buy that she would live in a house like that. I really do, actually. I can believe it completely.
It's upsetting for some people, but and look, Shannon and I, it's not appropriate for us to write, the mythology of the show. We're the freelance writers, so I think it was much more fitting that we write an episode like this, and so the little small areas that our script, ends up taking credit for in establishing Scully's house, it's like, okay, we've stepped into a territory, but the house that we picked, we used it in Intruders, actually. We, was the house that fit the script the best.
Yeah, and it did, it allowed for all the different things that Scully has to face throughout the evening. It did work really well in that sense. But yeah, I think it's like I say, it does sit on its own. In terms of writing it though, how did it work? Because obviously with the lack of dialogue and the writing scene descriptions and things like that, was it particularly tricky to put it onto page, or was it one of those things that you felt really sort of changed and evolved and came alive when it was being filmed and performed?
It was a really great challenge for me, because I'm definitely a dialogue heavy writer, and I think my writing and my descriptions is sometimes for script writing a little bit literary, but that's just the way I enjoy it more. So I think a script should be kind of an interesting read, even in the parts where nobody's saying anything. You kind of want it to flow. So I do enjoy that, and I do enjoy the challenge of trying to put visuals on a page, and so it was a great challenge for me. And Shannon and I worked out the story pretty well, so that when we both went off to write our bits, that we knew we were pretty secure about that. We both had a similar thing in mind to go to the writing process. And when it came to writing it was a good challenge, but I enjoyed it. I definitely learned from it. I grew from it, and it helped me, I think, a lot as a writer. And I will reference it forever in my writing, because I think there was a lot of great lessons about economy and being concise and clear about the way you want to see something, especially because the crew ended up being so respectful of what was on the page. They didn't reinterpret that much, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even though we were excited to see what everybody brought to the table creatively, they were very respectful to the script. So it was a great. I really just feel so honored and appreciative to have gotten the opportunity to do this. It was a great experience for me, and I definitely learned and grew from it.
Were you on set much when it was being filmed? Did you manage to see it actually happening?
We were there. We prepped the whole episode. We were there, and Glenn was very, very, very generous to Shannon and I in that respect. We really collaborated in pre-production, and I had to leave at I wasn't there for the final diner scene, but I was there for everything else. I had to go home to my kids, so I was there, and then I was there for most of the editing process, most of post. I was there for a lot of that as well. So yeah, no, it was. Glenn was a very, very generous collaborator with us, and very kind, and really let us put our fingertips all over the show. And so we were really, really lucky. We were really lucky in that respect.
Like I say, I think you can see that collaboration all over Followers. It really does feel like it all came together in that way. So yeah, it's a great. It will. I think it will go down. I really do think it will go down as a great episode, and I think it will be quite a favourite of season 11 actually, because it is so different and it is so intriguing in a lot of the ideas it comes out with. So yeah, I've got some fan questions we'll get into about this episode and a few other things. So yeah, firstly from Kurt North, who we're going back into Millennium here a little bit. He says, I'd love to know what it was like at the end of filming season 2 on set, and the Fourth Horseman episode. He said, it managed to make an apocalyptic event so personal. It was an amazing and brave piece of TV. How did you approach playing the descent into madness? And he said Patti Smith definitely was the right choice of song, by the way. I remember that song, and I remember that scene is incredible in that episode. That must have been a challenge.
I saw her perform it live not that long ago at the Wiltern, and I was like, it was so. She's just, Patti Smith is just so brilliant. What a brilliant creature. Yeah, no, it was, again, it was Glenn having a lot of faith in me. We've done a lot of things together over the years, and I think the thing that Glenn and I have as partners and collaborators is that I don't know if I'm the greatest actress, but I think that I'm pretty brave. That I think the thing that I bring to the table is I feel like I'm pretty empathetic, and that I'm pretty brave. I don't know. It doesn't always, I don't know that I'm, I don't know. It's hard to sit into your own self, but so it was a very, very, very big emotional challenge, because you're not playing off any person. And Tom Wright was the director. It's funny, I just worked with him not long ago in a show called Lore that Glenn worked on, and I played another crazy person in that. It seems to be that I always
what you do.
Although, Glenn always counts on me. I guess that's the thing. He counts on that, my willingness to be insane, and has pushed me to go, use that bravery and that willingness to be insane to his advantage I don't know if I want to say to his advantage, but it works for our collaboration, I think. And I use that, and I guess I use that piece of myself, in writing as well. I just don't have to have any makeup on, which is nice. Yeah, I mean, it was very challenging, and we filmed it in little pieces, and it was hard, but I really, again, you get to be part of something that a lot of other actors and a lot of people don't have the opportunity to do because Glenn and I have that trust with one another, and he knows that, that I'm gonna really dig to my personal deepest for him, that he can write that kind of thing. I think it pushes the other one. I think we push each other in that way, because we know that the other one's going to go to the ends of the possible earth. So it was challenging, but I think that's the expectation.
Yeah, and the next question I've got, I suppose, connects to that in a way, but going further back, in that Cortland asks, one thing I like to always like hearing from guests is about their memories of first getting hired and first joining something. So in terms of Space Above and Beyond, how did that happen? How did you feel about getting hired? How did the process begin there? And because, am I right in thinking that was before you appeared on the X-Files?
Yeah, it was way before.
Yeah, how did that all come about?
Randy Stone, who cast the X-Files, also and I think I said this the other day. I'm pretty sure I read for the X-Files back in the day for the Dana Scully part.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, well, I think everybody did, but Randy really knew. I think Randy he was good friends with Jodie Foster, and I think that he really kind of had in mind somebody who was very like Jodie in that way, and I think Jillian was like Jodie in that way, but obviously brings her own great kind of punky sense, and her own shine to it, and so I think it's great casting. He was such a lovely man and such a talented person. He was a great producer and casting director and a great friend. Oh, we miss him so much. But he was the casting director for Space Above and Beyond as well. And I got sent the script, and I didn't think that I was right for it. And they said, and my agent was like, no, Randy really wants you to do this, but he wants to see you first. And I said, okay. So I went in and I talked to Randy, and I was like, Randy, the way that this is written, that's not the way I'm going to play it. I don't think that that's what this character would do. He's like, oh, I'm so glad you said that. That's exactly right. Because Glenn had written it in a way that was, kind of trying to appeal to, the network but it wasn't necessarily the way you would play it. So, because it was a 2-hour pilot, which was very ambitious at that time. So Randy was like, okay, great. I just wanted to make sure that you got it. And it seems like you've got it. So I went in and auditioned, and the first time I read for Glenn and Jim, I think it was the first time I read for them, I was walking out, and I don't know if you've ever met Glenn, but he's very, very quiet, very kind of quiet at first. I mean, he's not quiet to me at all. We talk endlessly. To me, he's not quiet. Yeah. But to, when you first, like everyone who meets him, all of my friends, they often say, yeah, I talked to Glenn. I really like him. That's how I hear that. I liked him. And you're like, yeah.
A surprise. Yeah.
So he, because he's very quiet and taciturn and a little bit, he sits back and observes a lot. So I'm walking out of the room, and this guy says to me something, and I turned, and I don't really know who was who necessarily. And it was Glenn. And I said, I'm sorry, excuse me? And he said, I really liked your Cheers, which meant the episode of Cheers that I was in.
Oh,
and I was like,
okay.
And I was like, oh, oh, okay. Oh, well, thank you so much, And those are the first words that Glenn and I ever
Wow.
spoke to each other.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So, and then I think Glenn and Jim liked me for the part, and I think they fought for that, and I got it, and so that was great.
Yeah, and then obviously you've spent the next 20 plus years with Glenn and collaborating and things like that. What an amazing beginning, really, to that. So, yeah, and the next question from Isabel does tie into that as well, because she asks, I'd want to ask what your feelings are about the X-Files and about the broader, world you've been connected in with that. And is it something very special to you? Is it a big family? She says, I understand that The Field Where I Died was written especially for you by Glenn. So does it feel that way? Not obviously not just the X-Files, but Millennium and all of these projects that link together with creative people and similarly world building and things like that. Is it very special to you as a concept?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that everything that Glenn and I do together, I think we try to bring a family aspect to it to the best that we can. It was funny. I wrote to Chris after my episode aired, and Chris, I think he trusts Glenn. I think they have a real understanding of trust, and Glenn trusts me, and so therefore Chris, I guess, trusts me. And so I wrote him a note after our episode aired, and I said, you didn't have to trust me, but you did. All these years and over all these different projects. And, I thank you so much for the opportunity. And, I know there's a lot of talk about the parts where, women weren't involved in the X-Files or whatever. But I, as a woman, I have to say that I have been given quite a few very challenging opportunities by Glenn and Jim and everyone at 1013 over the years. And so I really, 1013 being Chris, I guess, really. But I am very grateful. I know that a lot of people don't get those kinds of opportunities, and that The Field Where I Died was written for me, but I think that it would be very, very difficult to audition people for that part. I would feel so sad for any actor who had to go in and try to audition to play that. That would have been horrible. It would have been so hard, because that of all the things that I've done, I think was one of the most difficult, because she was such a sad and damaged person, and I always played her as such. There was the Mulder side and the Scully side, and I always sort of played her as somebody who was very, I always just sort of thought that she was just a crazy, very broken, very abused, very damaged person, and her impetus to change characters was deep sadness, deep pain. So in order to make that real, I really tried to do that, and that was a really emotionally difficult part to play, and so many people, I've talked about this, a lot of people got caught up on the part where it was implied that she was the soulmate of Mulder and all that, but really what was important about it, and I never really think about that part, but what was important was, for me as an actor, was the opportunity to really challenge myself emotionally that way. And I really am so grateful to all of them for that opportunity. And I hope I didn't let them down.
Yeah, I don't think you did. I think that was a great performance. It really was, in a really interesting episode. And again, it's something slightly format breaking, really, around that time when the X-Files was kind of at its peak, and it was doing all of those different things. But no, it was a fantastic performance, a memorable performance, I think. And that's something that's stuck with a lot of people, definitely.
I think it is one of those things, very typical of Glenn, where I think some people don't like it because it is so uncomfortable. And I think a lot of the things that Glenn does make people uncomfortable. And that's intentional. He's trying to, shake it up a bit. So I think there are some people who feel about that episode that they just really don't like it. And I've always felt like part of the reason they don't like it is because that character is so uncomfortable to watch. She's in such misery. I think it is uncomfortable to watch.
Yeah, it's not one of the light episodes, it's not one of the or the action episodes or things like that. It is, it's quite intense. So it's
my kids won't watch it. They hate watching that. I think my daughter is just like, this is too sad.
I don't want to see my mom so upset on screen.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's not really, I certainly feel, when I'm watching it, I feel bad for that person, I've wondered all the years, why all the different kinds of reactions to that show. It seems to be one of those episodes that really divides people, and I do think it makes people uncomfortable, and I understand that, but I think that Glenn is always looking to challenge you to think about something differently. And I think I'm a tool to that, and I appreciate that opportunity.
What did you, if you don't mind answering this, it's absolutely fine if you don't want to. But what is your take on the issue about female writers? Because one of our fans, Adam, was asking, he was curious whether you and Shannon Hamblin were hired before or after the criticism came out about women writers. So I think a lot of people are curious about that, and what's your take on it? It's hard for me because I get it. I think that it's like this. And I said this the other day when Glenn and Jim and Chris and Gabe got together for last season, not the current season, but the last season, they all got together in my backyard. And that's where they had their secret meetings. And it was, I really wish I had taken pictures of it, because it was like the band and Darren was there and the band was back together. Yeah.
And they were, the original band. Gabe wasn't there at the beginning, but he's worked very closely with Chris. And so it was kind of like, wow, the band is back together and they are kind of family. Jim was Glenn's best man at our wedding, and Darren is my brother-in-law, and Glenn is my husband, and Chris, and there is a familial and band-like aspect to it. And like that thing that we talked about Glenn trusting me, they all trust each other. They have a shorthand with one another. They don't have to explain anything to one another. It's just very, very natural for them. And, this is a show that started 20 years ago. And I think the political climate and just the amount of women writers and women writers being pitched to staffs and all that stuff, I think it was just different. So those men happened to be on that staff at that time and have all worked in different ways together over the years. And so when they got back together, that was that. And so when it came around the second time and there was that kind of criticism, and I'm certainly not comparing them, I think they would be like, Kristen, don't compare us to the Rolling Stones. But, no one's saying the Rolling Stones don't have any chicks in their band. So, and I get it. Maybe the Rolling Stones would be better if they had chicks in their band, but I'm certainly not going to be the guy to fuck with the Rolling Stones. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think all of these things are a conversation. They're not, I think to throw criticisms out on, and then, run away from the bomb is tough. I certainly am an advocate for women writers, and I certainly think I think there should be more of them. But I think every opportunity that a woman gets in everything that they do, if they do a great job, they create the opportunity for other women to do it again. And so, in that respect, I hope to be, I hope that it does that. But Shannon and I were people who were in our own ways part of that family. So we were included and but we still had a responsibility to, like I said, to do a good job. And so we worked hard and we were really appreciative. And that was that. So I am very sympathetic to both sides of that thing. And I think, there are a lot of really strong women who work on that show. So obviously starting with Jillian, who is, the equal face of that show, and Grace Gilroy, who produces it, and Eleanor, who is absolutely an equal partner in the creation of this episode. She was the editor. She's just brilliant. And so there were a lot of strong, interesting, creative women who had a lot to say on how this episode went. And I do feel happy and proud about that. I think all of these things are a conversation. They shouldn't be a line in the sand. They're a conversation, and they're good. They're really good and very important conversations to have. And I get it, and I think, and I hope that the conversation continues and evolves, and that it becomes less a conversation that has, and I think that is becoming possible. This dialogue is creating something important, and I'm glad that we're having it on a bigger level.
Yeah, I think people will be really interested in that response, absolutely, because it is an ongoing conversation, and I think it's one fans are very interested in, really. So yeah, let's hope people keep talking about that, because you're right, it is important not to just throw criticism out there and not engage with it. So yeah, let's hope people keep having that conversation.
Yeah, they brought Shannon and I on, and I hope we did an okay job, and we create we create that just being there creates possibility, hopefully. But I don't think anybody, knowing all those guys, I really don't think it was anybody. And Glenn, of course, has provided so many opportunities for me as a woman, and he's brought so many other women up that people don't know about. So I certainly am very protective of that for Glenn, and I know that it was nobody's intention to be markedly excluding of women, but I do feel like we benefited from it, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity.
Speaking of writing, question from Michael. Have you always wanted to be a writer, or did it begin with your work on Intruders and then following through onto this? Has it always been something you've wanted to do?
I was an English major in college, and I left. I got a letter from the program asking to join the honors department. At the same time, I got an agent, and I left to be an actress. And I think that writing is something that I've always done. I had a theater company that I was the artistic director of, and I did writing and producing and stuff there. And so I've done writing over the years, and it's something I enjoy. It's writing is very, very difficult, and it's scary for me on a lot of levels. I enjoy it because you get to play all the parts, and you don't have to leave your bedroom, so that part is fun. It taps into being an actress. I think there's a part of it that's kind of all the same thing. So yeah. I mean, I think that I think the thing is, and it's funny because I'm talking to my 15-year-old son about this, and I think we all have all different kinds of things in us, and as we evolve and grow as people, those interests or talents kind of bubble up and rise and ebb and flow at different times in your life depending on what you're doing. And the idea that we have to decide who we're going to be forever, at one time in our life is really unfortunate, because I think that we are all things all the time, and some of those things take a bigger role at different periods in our life. So you could say, yeah, I've always written, but I still to this day don't necessarily see myself as a writer, because that's too scary for me. But I don't really see myself as an actress either. So I see myself mostly as a mom. I think I feel really comfortable there, because nobody's going to write about it on the internet. But I think that I've always written. I love writing. I love the challenge of it, and I hope that I get better all the time. But yeah, but I've done it off and on throughout the years, and Glenn and I have partnered up on some projects, and so I've been I don't do as much writing as I'd like to, in the sense that I have a lot of other responsibilities, and so I'm writing on and off more. But it's great. It's great, and I really appreciate it, and I hope to get better at it.
Yeah, let's hope we see more and more from you as well on both sides of the camera, really. That'd be great, definitely. One final question then from Anna, which goes back to followers and taps into the what we were talking about earlier, really, in many ways. But Anna wants to know, do you love technology or do you fear it? Or maybe a bit of both?
I think definitely both. I think anything that, celebrates the brilliance of people is so, I just can't believe how intelligent human beings are and how they can create so many things. And I think technology is one of those things that can be so incredibly helpful. But I think it can also, I think, just like the episode, I think we have to be very careful. I think we as human beings have to be responsible for everything, whether it's technology, our friends, our hearts, our planet, our government. I think it is our responsibility. And with the all of the genius that it takes to come up with technology, we have to meet it with equal genius and responsibility. So I think everything is both, but ultimately we are responsible, and that can be, and I think it is in the responsibility that it becomes a bit frightening, because we are ultimately responsible for the evolution of technology, and so we have to be very careful with it and how we handle it and how we treat it.
Wise words, and I think Followers definitely sums that up, really. As an episode, that's pretty much the message in many ways. So yeah, that's really great. Well, yeah, thank you. Thanks for coming on to the show, Kristen. It's been really lovely to speak to you about all this and get some really great insights into all kinds of things that I know fans of the Xcast, listeners, fans of the X-Files and listeners of the show will be really interested in. So it's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
I really appreciate it. I hope I wasn't irritating or obnoxious, and I really appreciate the interest. I'm deeply flattered and honored to be invited on the show. So thank you so much.
Oh no, it's a pleasure. You weren't any of those things. Don't worry. It's usually my job.
You were lovely. Thank you.
Well, thank you. If people want to find out more about you or where you are, where are you on most? Is it Twitter, or have you got a website, things like that?
Yeah, I think definitely. I think if I try to be, I think Twitter's the easiest because I'm public on Twitter, and I always try to do my best to chat. I think I'm not a really great. I'm not great with like fan mail, or like if I have to send a picture or an autograph. That's not my best thing. But I'm happy to have a talk with you about almost anything. Within my character limit, I guess. Yeah. But I'm not. I don't really see myself when people say they're a fan. It always I'd rather just be your Twitter pal and sure, ask me a question. I'm just here.
Are you sure we're not getting the Kristen bot and not actually real Kristen? That's what we've got to be.
I know. I got to get, what is it, verified or whatever it is.
Get the blue tick.
I don't think I have enough followers for that. I'm hiding out. And I apologize in advance for my political retweets. You can unfollow me at any time.
Well, yeah, guys, do check out Kristen's Twitter. Like I say, she's on there. She's ready to chat. It won't be the Kristen bot. So yeah, get on there, guys, and follow what she's doing, because we want to know, want to see more, want to see what the next followers, the next project, the next whatever it will be. So yeah, that'd be really good if you do that, guys. And remember, you can find us on Twitter as well at the X_cast. Do come on there, let us know what you think of these episodes. You can also find us on Facebook with our group and our page, the Xcast Basement, the podcast fan group. Come on in there for lots of chatter, lots going on. And on Patreon at Patreon/the Xcast, where you can become one of our patrons and get early access to all this goodness that we're producing for you. So yeah, we'll be back very soon for a little bit more coverage on Followers. I think next up is the mailbag, where we'll get your thoughts on what you thought of the episode. So as ever, until then, remember, trust no one. The Xcast, an X-Files podcast, is produced and presented by Tony Black, alongside a dedicated group of podcasters and X-Files fans. You can find us on Twitter at the Xcast, and on Facebook if you type in the Xcast, or at our group, X-Files Basement, an Xcast podcast fan group, where you can continue the discussion about all things Mulder and Scully. If you want to support the Xcast further, you can now subscribe and become a patron of the show on Patreon. On Google, just type patreon.com/the Xcast. That's Patreon. You'll see all of our tiers, subscription options and perks, which include early access to episodes, bonus content such as commentaries on X-Files episodes, access to a patron chat zone, and even appearing on one of our patron roundtable discussions. We would appreciate any support you can give the show, so just go to patreon.com/the Xcast to find out more. Our title music is provided courtesy of Will A, who you can find on Twitter at IamWillAYE.